Hello everyone, it's Theme Park Avenue, I'm Eric. If you are a roller coaster enthusiast, there is a 100% chance that you are familiar with Top Thrill Dragster at Cedar Point. This roller coaster was 420 feet tall and launched riders at speeds up to 120 miles per hour. It was a record breaker when it first opened in 2003, and it was loved by many for nearly 20 years. Unfortunately, it was also a very unreliable ride. The hydraulic launch system presented unique challenges for regular operation, and the windy location near the Lake Erie shore didn't help either. The ride was closed quite often, and it was notoriously difficult to actually get on it. When I first went to Cedar Point in 2014, Top Thrill Dragster was closed the entire 3 days I was there. However, I was fortunate enough to get multiple rides on this coaster in the following years. My final ride on it was August 1st, 2021, 2 weeks before it closed for good, following an accident in which a metal bracket came loose from a train and injured a woman waiting in line. Top Thrill Dragster never operated again, but a successor arrived 3 years later. On May 4th, 2024, Top Thrill 2 opened to the public. Unfortunately, it closed 12 days later due to different issues with the ride vehicles. But on May 3rd of this year, Top Thrill 2 officially reopened and it remains in operation now. I rode Top Thrill 2 on August 2nd, and it is a behemoth that even puts the original Dragster to shame in terms of scale. That 420-foot spike adds a whole new level of intimidation. But looks are not everything. The ride experience is what makes waiting in line worth it. And I must say, both iterations of Top Thrill are among my favorite coasters ever. Certainly worth very long waits. I can see a case for either of them being superior. But in this video, I'm going to officially make that decision for myself. Does Top Thrill Dragster remain the king? Or does Top Thrill 2 overtake the original Strata coaster? Let's talk about these rides. Before we can determine which Top Thrill is better, we must first understand what makes them different. At face value, there is only one key difference: the backward spike on Top Thrill 2. While Top Thrill Dragster just launched riders over the hill and that was that, Top Thrill 2 utilizes a swing launch, in which the train launches forward, doesn't clear the hill, launches backwards at the spike, then launches forwards again and completes the ride like the original Dragster. This difference may seem negligible, and maybe it is, but there are a lot of other differences to explore. Let's talk through each ride's full experience, discussing the highlights and lowlights. Then we will draw comparisons and determine which roller coaster is better. First, the original Top Thrill Dragster. The ride experience began with the train departing the station straight ahead. The train would stop at a traffic light, and the sounds of race car engines filled the air. I'm not sure why, but this section where the train was waiting for the launch always scared me. Maybe it's because I knew it was coming, but the anticipation for the launch always made my stomach churn. Very few roller coasters can do that, but Dragster was special. You would then hear an announcement say, "Keep your arms down, head back, and hold on." Once the train and launch were ready, the fun really began. Racing lights rapidly appeared, and once the green light showed, the train almost instantly launched forward. It would go from 0 to 120 miles per hour, give or take a few, in 4 seconds, and you felt that acceleration. Reaching such a high speed so quickly was a one-of-a-kind experience. No other roller coaster launch I've ever experienced has felt like it picked up speed quite like that. Once you hit the top speed, the train ascended up a 420-foot tall top hat, twisting at the top, slowly cresting over it. You might have gotten a quick pop of airtime, but really, this moment just felt like a breather. You are sort of up there for a few seconds, not much happens, you lose a lot of speed because of how high you had to climb, and if you were lucky, you would get a rollback. But in most cases, you would then descend down the 420-foot hill, naturally picking up lots of that speed again. The train spiraled down on a vertical drop and continued to dash forward through the finish line, eventually coming to a full stop. The ride from launch to brakes was under 25 seconds, but every second counted on Dragster. Despite being literally just one hill, and an experience entirely reliant on that launch, the launch was simply so good that Dragster was indeed among what I consider the best roller coasters I've ridden. There were other things to appreciate about the ride as well. First off, the smoothness. This ride was glass smooth. never offering any sort of shakiness in my experience. That made the speed the focus, and you never really had to worry about coming off the ride in pain. Second, the restraints. Top Thrill Dragster had a lap bar that was not at all bulky or uncomfortable. There was a seatbelt underneath that, and that's it. You felt pretty exposed, so the wind was in your face and the ride felt even faster than it might have otherwise. Third, the theming. In terms of physical props, there wasn't much more than those main lights, the finish line, and the train design. But the queue and surrounding area were actually quite brilliantly thought out. The queue was entirely surrounded by the roller coaster track, and since the track completed a full circuit, the queue felt like the area within the racetrack you would see at many actual speedways. This idea is further explored by the bleachers outside of the ride. Not only do the bleachers have a built-in concession stand, they also emulate the stands of an actual motorway, really selling that whole racing theme for Top Thrill Dragster even when it's not a racing roller coaster. These bleachers remained intact for Top Thrill 2. It is now time to talk about that successor. The very beginning of Top Thrill 2 is completely different from Top Thrill Dragster. The train pulls out of the station, but it veers to the right. Why does it do that? Because once your train pulls up to the racing lights, a switch track is moved into a position allowing your train to go backwards at the spike. As you wait for this, you hear some rocking music and it sounds nice, but it's just not the same as those engine noises that made Dragster so scary. But fear not, we still have racing lights, and while they're not as quick as the original, they have audio cues that make them arguably more realistic. Now, the launches begin. You first go from 0 to 74 miles per hour and partially ascend the top hat. That's not nearly enough to get you over the hill, so you then travel backwards. Now you launch up the vertical spike at 101 miles per hour. You briefly face straight down to the world below, then dash back down to the spike to experience the final launch. You reach 120 miles per hour, reportedly. Then you crest over the hill seemingly quicker than on Top Thrill Dragster, and once again spiral to the ground, zooming through the finish line. Therefore, once the launches are over, I think the two experiences are almost identical. However, the swing launch that sends the trains forwards and backwards makes Top Thrill 2 feel completely different at first. The biggest positive of Top Thrill 2 is that you get to go backwards. The spike is a marvelous sight from off-ride, and it's even more fun on-ride. That backwards moment is a very worthy addition to the ride, and the jump from 101 miles per hour to 120 afterwards feels surprisingly powerful. This whole section reminds me of Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, in which the final launch after a backwards spike feels very powerful, despite the previous one already feeling very fast. The biggest difference from Pantheon is that Top Thrill 2 is significantly faster. Top Thrill 2 is a much longer ride than its predecessor, and it feels more complete as a layout than Top Thrill Dragster. Top Thrill 2 doesn't have to rely on the crazy acceleration of the launch, which is nice because there isn't really any to begin with. The first launch is now much slower, and the suddenness and power of Top Thrill Dragster's launch is most certainly not there. It's a good launch, you still feel the wind and all that, but no launch on Top Thrill 2 remotely compares to Dragster's. The launch sections have a completely different purpose now, and therefore, a different feel. Frankly, I would call Top Thrill Dragster's launch the best moment on either iteration. But there is another key difference between the two rides that helps keep Top Thrill 2 in the running. It's not the theming. As a matter of fact, I think it's harder to see the coaster from within the queue now, so that racetrack theme is a little lost. It's not the smoothness, I think the rides are on equal footing there. It's the restraints. Top Thrill 2 is a lap bar like Top Thrill Dragster did, but this one feels a lot more comfortable and open. When I rode Top Thrill 2, I completely crumbled to the side during the spiral down in a way I never did on Dragster. Dragster's lap bar was already a good restraint, but Top Thrill 2 might have the best designed lap bar of all time. You always feel safe, but never feel trapped, and that is perfection. It allows for added thrill as you fly out of your seat on the spike, and can cause weird degrees of motion like what happened to me on the spiral. This restraint helps give Top Thrill 2 an edge, and overall, while I think Top Thrill Dragster was a scarier and more intense roller coaster, I think Top Thrill 2 is more accessible and more fun. I love the added duration, backwards launch, escalation of thrill over time, and those lap bars. As a result, I enjoy Top Thrill 2 more than Top Thrill Dragster. But why stop there? There is another roller coaster we should compare to Top Thrill 2. You probably know what I'm gonna say. It's Kingda Ka. Kingda Ka was the former tallest roller coaster in the world, found at Six Flags Great Adventure. It was demolished earlier this year, but when it was open, I liked it more than Top Thrill Dragster. So let's find out what the best strata coaster of all time is, Kingda Ka or Top Thrill 2. I've explained what makes Top Thrill 2 great and superior to Dragster in my eyes, so now let's say why Kingda Ka is superior. Kingda Ka did have some weak points to it in a way. The restraints were bulkier, going over the shoulders. The ride was a little shakier, and its acceleration just did not feel as fast as Dragster's. Now by definition, it was just as fast if not more so. But I always found the launch to feel less sudden and more gradual. What made Kingda Ka better was the intensity once the train got to top speed. The gradual build-up in forces as my head was pushed back in my seat, only being pushed back further by the wind, and that feeling of being completely at the mercy of the roller coaster, that's what made Kingda Ka special. I might call it the most intense roller coaster I've ever been on. Even if the launch was inferior to Dragster, the ride felt so much more powerful as a whole, and provided an adrenaline rush not even Dragster could generate. That is why Kingda Ka was my favorite strata coaster for a while. So Kingda Ka and Top Thrill Dragster are pretty different. But the kind of thrill you get from Kingda Ka is even more different from that spectacle and completeness of Top Thrill 2. So which of those two is better? I can make quick comparisons like theming and smoothness, but that's not really what makes the difference here. The comparison that I need to make is just personal preference. So which of these is better? A brutally intense and powerful roller coaster that's literally just one tall hill, a smaller hill, and nothing else? Or a longer multi-launch coaster with so much enjoyment, but far fewer thrills? Well, it's a very tough call. I frankly think all three strata coasters are very close together in quality. However, I think the strata coaster that provides the experience I liked the most was Kingda Ka. Kingda Ka was a ride like no other. Its power is something I never felt before riding it, and haven't felt since. Not even a ride as sweeping in nature as Top Thrill 2 can quite beat it for me. But at the very least, Top Thrill 2 is still one of the best roller coasters in the world, and a very worthy replacement of the original Top Thrill Dragster. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this comparison video. Comment down below your thoughts on the strata coasters, subscribe for more theme park videos. I'll see you next time.